welcome everyone. I'm Lilia from Territory 3 and really glad to have Kevin and Ruby from Joyous with us today. Now Joyous, you may know as a software all about improving the employee experience and providing feedback in a transparent way. And that startup has been growing for a few years now and still growing well. But one thing that Kevin and Ruby have put together is a book called Joyous, which is all about a new way of working, which is what they will be focusing on chatting and talking about today. So really glad to have you guys here. I'd love to pass over for you guys to do a little bit of an intro on yourselves and what you're up to, and then we can get into a bit of a presentation. Cool. So Kevin, if you'd like to do a bit of a quick background on yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Ruby and I wrote Joyfully together, but before that, so I've been at Joyous for about 4 years now, kind of joining early on. Before that, I was at Movio, and before that, I had completely transitioned out of tech. I'd been doing some banking, finding my way back after. A kind of sorted history from I guess doing tech in university, moving away from it quite drastically, coming back in, and then finding a great place to kind of create some awesome things with other folks. Ruby?
Yeah, so I have been at Joyous, I think two years and a few months now, and it's been an awesome experience. Hired as head of product, and I've been co-CEO for just over a year, I realized yesterday, which is a cute milestone. And then ahead of that, I had product roles and was an engineer. Ahead of that, I was a failed comedian. Anyway, it's all worked out for the best. And yeah, stoked to be here today and to be talking to some founders about, the lens across Joyfully that makes sense for you guys to think about.
Awesome. And just a quick note, this webinar will be recorded and published onto our website afterwards. So if you do have to jump off, that's cool. You can come back and rewatch later on and share it around to anyone who you think this might be useful for. But yeah, I would love to jump into a presentation that I know Ruby and Kevin have put together. So if you'd like to see if that share screen wants to work and have a look into that.
I feel like it's behaving.
Cool. Yeah, working for me.
Yay. I guess first things first. It's a very helpful slide as it saves me from thinking a bit. I thought it might just make sense for those of you who don't know us to just quickly say a little bit about what Joyous does. We're an enterprise SaaS company. We at a team of around 40 at the moment, and we have mainly based here in Auckland, New Zealand, but we have an office in Sydney and an office in Fort Worth, Dallas, and Texas, and we target Australia, New Zealand, and North America at this stage. We're past our Series A, and the tool itself, it's a pretty good business model. Like, we target large organizations with 1,000 employees plus, and license for every employee to use it, which is a pretty good footprint user-wise. And it's subscription like you'd expect in SaaS. So the tool itself involves frontline staff and operational improvement and change, because the theory is people doing the work in companies are best positioned to provide feedback on topics like customer experience, quality, productivity, and safety. And so, to shift the needle on operational topics, like feedback has to be conversational so that it's easy to actually ask for clarification and make a really human connection. And so that's how Joyous kind of gets the sort of data quality that's never been possible before with surveys. And so because of that, Joyous is open, by definition, because otherwise there's no human connection and no conversation, which makes Joyous actually really great for things like cultural transformation too, because it helps companies, these large companies in particular, reinforce the move towards a more transparent, trust-based culture. And we're really targeting diverse workforces as well. So people with large workforces out in the field where it's really hard to form those sorts of human connections. The frontline staff and their leaders become more comfortable giving and receiving feedback, improving well-being and belonging, even in the context of that more remote workforce. So that's just a little 2-minute explanation of us. And which we're tracking pretty well so far and feeling pretty good about it. So Kevin and I thought before we launch straight into like joyfully and that way of working and how we want you to think about it, we wanted to make a point to you that a large part of why we feel this way of working is successful for us, and the fact that we've, I guess, even invented it in the first place, is because of the values of the company and just how we are as a group and how we work together. And it's not just that these are our values, it's that we've arrived at these values as a company together in quite a deliberate way. It's not like the founders came up with this and told the team that this is what our values are, or even the leaders. Like literally we do retrospectives and we refresh these every year, and the whole company kind of lives them and breathes them and buys into it. And it's in an environment like this that doing something like joyfully and making an impact is like really possible for us, particularly that tight collaboration and buy-in to this being the culture. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Kev?
Yeah, it's been interesting because, as Ruby said, we've kind of done this exercise every year and kind of created or redone our values based off of what kind of came up in those company-wide retrospectives. And interestingly, while we have seen a shift over time, there's definitely been things that have stayed core, and those are the things that I think as founders, like, you're able to cement early on. And for us, those have really been that idea of collaboration, of allowing people to kind of think outside the box and have large impacts. And that has been the environment that's allowed something like this to kind of flourish. And a lot of our, I think, different ways of doing things to become possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, like I think as well, like as we're talking to founders, largely, I'm expecting on the webinar, we have the privilege of working with experienced founders, and I have experience working with first-time founders and experienced founders. And what I think has been really great about both our founders, the brothers, Mike and Phil, is they really do like pride themselves on hiring people and then giving those people like everyone talks a big game about hiring good people and then giving them autonomy. But like, I think founders who are newer to the game naturally like find that a bit harder to do. But Mike and Phil have been really excellent at that. And like they still have a really impressive way of shifting our mindsets when they think we should consider alternatives, but they don't come in and do it for us. They have to say very little to make an impact, and we respect them for it. And we really take their thoughts on board. And so like, yeah, I think them giving people like myself and Kevin and Lisa, the other co-head of engineering, that like trust and autonomy to unfold things ourselves has been one of the reasons why this has become possible. So it's just something for you to think about as a founder, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, the point of today was for us to talk to you about this way of working that we've developed. And there's a book on our website, so you can just pretty easily go download it. It's like the most concise book you're ever going to read. It's only 60 pages and it's very, very, very practical. And like one of the things that if I was a founder would appeal to me about this book is that like, early on, you want to create this like high performing, really productive team that's super, super aligned on what it is you're trying to build. And like a really solid framework, like a holistic framework for that, it doesn't really exist. Like there isn't really something that's going to tell you how to form the strategy, how to get everyone aligned to it, how to build your relationships and team structure, and then how to actually go through your way of working. And this can give you this, and it's referenceable and it's extremely practical. So it walks through examples too. So if you are like struggling with that at all, then like you could take a look at this, and like we don't think anyone should take all of it. Like people should just take of it like what makes use of them. And yeah, Kevin and I had a view that there was one thing in particular that we thought you guys as founders, you guys or girls as founders should consider. So we'll do a bit of a show and tell on that. But until then, did you want to lead out some of the bits on strategic alignment?
Oh, the other thing I just wanted to mention before we jump into that, like why did we even create this thing? For us, a big one is it was how we how we were working. So we were in large part just kind of documenting what we were actually doing. And also that's at the same time thinking quite critically about it. And honestly, through writing this book, adjusting some of those ways because we really had to think through what it was we were doing, what we were trying to achieve out of it, how might be a better way to do that. The other thing is we want Joyous to stay a place we want to work. We joined an early stage company. We liked the early stage company. We know Joyous is going to grow, but we don't want to change that, I guess, that vibe, that culture, that feeling of being in an early stage company, being able to have large impacts, not just yourself, but everyone else on the team having that kind of ability. And then lastly, the capital, like the culture, but also the capital efficiency. So like a lot of Joyfully talks about kind of being able to do more with less, being able to, being able to achieve great outcomes with a smaller team, with less specialization, with broader capabilities. So it's like, that comes both from the cultural side of that's kind of what we like working on. That's what we see other people that are motivated like to work in, but also from a business side that translates into quite a lot of capital efficiency.
And I think it's a prudent time for any founder to be thinking about that, because like the capital market is definitely shifting into a tighter space at the moment. And so like, as Kevin said, we're really driven by wanting to, like, we know the less people we have in the company, the nicer the culture is going to feel, just because that's obvious, right? But yeah, it does give you much more optionality the more capital efficient you are. And like pretty much like whether it's achievable or not, our goal has become to become one of the first enterprise SaaS organizations to reach $1 billion valuation with 100 employees. And I'm just talking in numbers because I know founders understand dollars, but that's pretty much what we're strapping for. And that means that like the things that we've got set up in this book, which a lot of it is driven towards making that doable. Yeah. Okay. Now I'll move on to strategic alignment and this thing called the negative roadmap. So I guess, I think there's 3 major parts to the book, and one of the major parts is about strategy and alignment. And as a story, I guess, when I arrived 2 years ago, I was the first product hire, and one of the founders had been doing the product side of things until I came. And of course, when you found the business, you're scrapping to build your MVP and to prove your product market fit. And so I came along to help go from that point to like the next step. But on the natural things that happens in an early stage is you're not necessarily 100% aligned between founders and early team on actually exactly what the priorities are and why they're the most important, and have real clarity on what you're going to prioritize. And often it's the gray areas that catch you. So you do know what generally people want you to do, but then there's a bunch of ands that really can like destroy your focus that just come up quite casually. So that's the strategic alignment part we think is super important. And I will show something, but do you want to add to that before I show the roadmap stuff, Kev?
I just think this is kind of crucial, right? When you're early on, you have a small team, you don't have a lot of capital, but also you don't have a lot of throughput. And so you really need to make sure you're pursuing those high impact features. You're not kind of getting sidetracked on something that's not going to have as large of an impact, because that can have a really big effect on, are you going to make it? And while we're going to talk about, I guess, a methodology for approaching kind of this alignment, and there seems to be, there's a lot of structure around it. It's not actually rigid, especially in those early startups, there is that requirement to pivot. This still 100% allows for that. And we'll try to kind of talk that through as we go.
Yeah. And like, I think our founder tip for you here is that as a founder, your words carry like, you want to 10x everything in your business. Well, your words carry 10x the weight of other people's. And so if you casually walk up to someone in a team and you say, I think we should do this, actually that's for most people, even your senior leaders, they're going to interpret that as a directive to do what you've just said and assume that it's now taken priority over what else you might think is actually agreed. And so it's happened in every place that I've worked, and even with our awesome near perfect founders, like they still have thoughts and occasionally say them, and like now we're good enough to clarify, and this system prevents us from making assumptions. But it's just something to be super conscious of from your end, is that you're absolutely clear on like when you're talking about something just speculatively versus are you actually saying that people should go away and do some stuff. on that. And now I have to figure out how to get out of this presentation mode and show and tell. So we thought it would be really cool to actually show you the how we do get alignment, just tactically. And so we use Notion. Notion is amazing. And we create roadmaps. Now, roadmaps aren't special or unique, but what is special about ours is we have 2 for each period that we plan in. So this is Q2 2022. And you'll notice this enormous word positive. So we have a positive roadmap, but most importantly, and the biggest game changer for us has been a negative roadmap. And it's not a backlog. It's basically the sorts of things that various people believe are important. And so what we do, important, but that are not important enough that they're going to trump these other things that are the most mission critical. So we have a roadmap that is what we've agreed between head of engineering, head of product, and the CEOs and anyone else in our strategy squad, which is what we call the leadership team. This is what we agree up front a few weeks ahead of a quarter starting is the focus for the quarter. And it's a positive roadmap. It's really big, chunky pieces of work, and they are listed in a priority order. But to arrive at this, we actually document all the things we think we should be doing for the quarter. And then we go through this really critical process of, is this thing as important as these things on the positive roadmap? And if it's not, it goes into the negative roadmap, which is not a backlog. It's a bunch of stuff we're saying we're just not going to do it. We're basically saying no. For example, the positive roadmap stuff we're doing is so important. We've made a conscious decision not to build a demo environment, and we have a workaround for how we can solve for that problem. But we've basically said it's not a not now, it's like a no. And we create a new negative roadmap every single quarter. So it doesn't become like next quarter, we create a positive roadmap by pulling all these things from the previous negative roadmap up. It's like we completely build a new negative roadmap each time. And it is amazing how like quite often nothing from the old negative roadmap comes into the next negative roadmap. So it doesn't really carry over the way that we'd expected because things shift quite a bit. So we thought we'd show you that, but we also thought you might be interested to see a little bit within the way of working, how rather than people doing Agile where they have like mythical story points and they like estimate intangibles, we're really tangible. So we use a Gantt chart. And these kind of pieces of work map to the stuff on that positive roadmap, and you can really actually see in time how long we think work is going to take, and you can see us planning ahead. And when things aren't allocated, and the colors represent different crews, teams that are working on these things. And within these, I won't go into it. Like it clearly describes the work being done. And also each week, product and engineering, we just get together and we'll update this. So if something takes longer, it takes longer, and that's fine. And as long as we're clear and transparent about it to our founders and anyone else who's interested, like it's okay for things to take longer because, well, that's just the reality when you have a bunch of unknowns. And our engineering team is pretty amazing at trying to figure out the unknowns first so that we get to a point of predictability as soon as we can. But yeah, we thought that would be a bit interesting to share. And so if something comes up for us, sorry, I've got to switch back to the PowerPoint. Let me figure that out. If something comes back to us mid-quarter that's really important, we don't just suddenly change direction. We all have to use that roadmap and go, okay, do we agree? Are we going to put this in? Therefore, what's now going out to the negative roadmap, because you can't just and stuff. And like that's, I think, a thing that most companies haven't nailed. They think they're not going or, they're going and then you just don't meet your goals. So we use that positive roadmap, like the fact that it's there, it's written down, it's agreed and signed off before we change direction. Yeah, is there anything you want to add there, Kit?
Yeah, it really lets you compare items. So what I've seen in the past is you don't have a single set of priorities. You have a mixture. You have maybe, and they're all competing, and it's kind of personal preference as to what wins. And here you get really, really clear of, no, we have 1 quarter, we have an amount of stuff that we are able to get through, and you can compare an item to an item. You may not feel like it's, comparing apples to apples, but it doesn't actually matter because you only have a set amount of time. And it is that whole, like, then when something moves in, because things do move, of course they move, but it makes you have that conversation, and it makes you go, now something needs to move out. So at all times, you actually have a good understanding of what are we actually going to achieve. Because oftentimes when you have multiple sets of, maybe we have a set of priorities for security and a set of priorities for performance, a set of priorities for features, and a set of priorities for something else. Now actually understanding what you're going to be able to achieve this quarter can get quite difficult. So being able to put all of that together on one place, have a conversation, compare the relative impact that you're going to have by doing something, regardless of where it originated from, is just huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing that as founders is risky, and sometimes when you're really, really early, you might not feel like you have much of a choice, especially if you're B2B, is try really, really, really hard not to sell features. So try not to close deals on the basis of features that don't exist. Try to be really good about your roadmap, and just sell the product that you have. Because it's very easy to agree features, to close deals, to get the ARR, but it's so risky because some of those things are unlikely to be the things that will make the biggest impact to your future business, your future ARR. And one random prospect isn't going to be the right person to make that call for you. You're the right people to make that call, or your product people are the right people to make that call. And that should be based not just on a prospect saying something, but on much more deliberate research and accumulation of data. And then maybe a prospect validates something for you on the roadmap, and that's a healthy thing to do. But yeah, try not to sell features. And so that's something that we've agreed, is that we align our senior leaders on the roadmap. We don't sell features. We also don't sell the roadmap. So we will present roadmap usually once a deal is signed. And only then do we try to show people roadmap. So we don't want to sell on a promise because it will put us under too much pressure. Now, you might be too early stage for that some of the time, and you have no choice but to do that. But we're sort of, entering year 4, and we've been doing this since, year 2. And it's gone okay for us. I've made a couple of exceptions where we've showed roadmap towards the end of a deal process, but otherwise we've been fine. And yeah, because of that, it allows us to stay focused, and it also allows our engineers the time to build quality code, because what you don't want to be is like Kevin said, you've got not a lot of bandwidth, right? And what you don't want to be doing is pressuring your engineers, and then therefore the quality of the code is sacrificed, which means you're almost guaranteed that you're creating tech debt that those engineers are going to have to go and re-architect down the track and stop you from continued throughput. So it's better to let them take a bit more time to build a foundation that you can scale from. Yeah, so next, Kevin, did you want to talk about this?
Sure. So early on, if you're early in a startup, you're probably here already, because this is kind of what a small team of engineers looks like, right? As a small team of engineers just starting to bootstrap together a product, you have a shared ownership of the code base, you have a shared understanding of the code base, you have a shared set of tools and practices and standards, and it is a simple code base because you're early on. Now, as you grow, that starts to change, and oftentimes businesses will, they'll start to split the teams, they'll start to split the product into various pieces, they'll start to choose new languages and technologies and these kinds of things. But what we've really found, at that early stage of the company, when you have that small engineering team and everybody has ownership of everything, that's when you're going the fastest. That's when you're actually able to get out as much as possible, and then generally you slow down. And so we kind of looked at it and we said, why do we need to slow down? Why do we need to change the way we work? Why don't we just try to scale this? And so this is kind of where this idea of unified engineering came from. It's we know what it works when you have 3 engineers. What happens if you have 15, if you have 20? And we've been trying to, that's essentially what we've been trying to scale. And the thing is, we just kept the same principles, right? So for us, we only hire full stack engineers. We expect our engineers to work across the entire code base, but we make it easy for them. We do things like we are full stack TypeScript, one language. So you don't have to have a whole bunch of expertise in order to work across that. We share the same tools. We use the same type of linting, other types of tools so that the code looks the same. Within the front end, within the back end, we also use TypeScript in things like our infrastructure. We use Pulumi. We use GitHub Actions to run our CI. So that's also TypeScript. We just go as much as we can, the code should look the same. You should be able to write the same, which makes this whole scaling of full stack a lot easier. The other thing we do is we really try to not build things that are not our business. So, we don't maintain our own database. We don't maintain our own infrastructure. We don't, if we can give it to a third party, if it doesn't actually have something to do with employee feedback, then we don't want to do it. We'll happily pay for it. Engineering, especially now, hiring more engineers, building your engineering team, it's probably harder than it's ever been. So just try to outsource anything that isn't your business logic, that's not something that you're bringing uniquely to your customers. We've had huge success in that. And also it makes it so much easier to build because the engineers don't have to think about that. They don't have to know about it. They don't have to learn about it and upskill on it. So yeah, that's kind of what we've been trying to do with unified engineering.
Yeah, and the beauty of this, like from a founder or like a leadership perspective, is if like all your engineers can do all parts of your product and you have this single agreed prioritized roadmap of things needs to get built to make an impact for your business, well, now the entire team can just burn through that perfectly in priority order. You don't have these little compartments that like basically may not be as important as this one, but you can't redirect them because they don't have the understanding of that code base or that part of your products. So if you want to be like really, really efficient at building fast, this is like a really key thing to add to that whole idea of a single prioritized roadmap.
Yeah, it allows it to actually work, because otherwise you end up splitting the product. You have 3 different teams. Now you have 3 different roadmaps because you can't just move that resource around. When you have a unified engineering team, you work on whatever is most impactful. It doesn't matter what that is. And we all know, whether it's even a front and back end split, you never have equal amounts of work in any given place of your product. Sometimes you'll have a lot of work here, sometimes you'll have a lot of work there, and you want that, like, as a business that's trying to get the most out of it, that's trying to do the most impactful thing at the moment, that flexibility is really key.
Yeah. So we got like, I think around, should we be chatting for 40 minutes or 50 minutes? What do you want us to aim for?
Maybe around 40, and then we'll see if there's any Q&A.
Okay, so we got about 12 minutes to go. So we'll just move through some of this a little bit faster. So I guess something else to consider, like we would recommend hiring a product person earlier rather than later, and like not keeping that with founders for too long. I think there's research out there that says the earlier that you hire your key product person, the more successful you're likely to be faster. So that would be, if you could take your ego out of the equation, a good reason to do that, unless you're a killer product person, and obviously the best person to do it. But when you get the product person, your directive as a founder to product and engineering should be, you're not 2 teams, you're 1 team. And it's not product versus engineering, and try to work really hard from your end to emphasize to them that what you don't want is the typical relationship between product and engineering, which is one of tension, like where product wants a bunch of product features and engineering knows there's all these really important scaling challenges to come up, and that to be like a fight to see who kind of wins for the priority. Like our partnership is like really meaningful to us, and that like we all care about all those things together, and we all really care about making an impact to the business and delivering on these goals that we have. And so the discussions that Kevin and I have with Lisa about roadmap and stuff is hugely empathetic, and like we're very aligned on like what we commonly understand to be best for the business across those things. And so I think we spend therefore very little time on tension and conflict and like trying to wrangle the other, like products not trying to hurry engineering up and browbeat them to deliver features to artificial deadlines. We're trying to like make an impact, not an impression with our code. And that frees up all that mind space for us to actually help support engineering by identifying and noticing ways we can simplify scope and so on to deliver impact faster. And they actually help us as well reduce our scope ahead of them building. So if you can get that group to see themselves as one partnership, it will serve your business like in a huge way for the long term.
Massively. Yeah, because you get engineers that care about users, that care about user impact, that care about the business in that perspective. You get product folks who care about scaling and performance and tech debt and development efficiency. And you're able to, again, this kind of comes back to the single roadmap. You weigh that all up together and you have a very just deliberate conversation about it. What is going to make the biggest difference? And then you agree on where that is to go. But it's really that trying to make sure that it's not a competition between the two. It is what is going to have the biggest impact on the business in this quarter. It's not who's right. It's not who wins. It's what's going to have the biggest impact.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, so just to move us through org structure stuff. So the book covers a lot about org structure. I don't know how big your various, I mean, like a lot of us are calling ourselves startups way beyond the point we are these days. We don't think we're a startup anymore, but anyway, scale up, whatever you'll call us. You got to be, I think, really early stage deliberate about what you want your structure to end up looking like. And like my recommendation to you is that your structure does not end up looking like this one. And now is the time to design your hierarchy in such a way that you can compress it. And when you compress it and there's less layers, you have less people actually doing nothing, more people able to work, and less power structures for them to work through to actually get things agreed and aligned, and then less noise in between, and therefore more efficiency. And so our org structure looks something like this. It's a comparable one to that other graph or flow chart I just showed you. So you'll notice there's a huge difference. And one of the things I really implore you as a CEO to do is to put yourself at the bottom of your hierarchy. You're not at the top. If you think of yourself as someone at the top of your company and you don't realize that your job is actually to support these other people into succeeding, I think you might just be building an ego-driven business that's based on the cult of your personality. And like the sooner you can make that not be true, the more likely it is that your group of people will succeed. And so what we did was we flipped our org chart upside down, put our CEOs at the bottom of our org chart, and we view all our leaders, the only reason they're there is to support our people. They're not there to tell them what to do. They're to support the outcomes. If we have the clarity on what we need to focus on, then our job is just to help everyone be able to achieve that and to feel really good about it. And so we want to keep it to sort of 3 layers if we can. It remains to be seen if that's possible with 100, but we're at 40 and it is so far. So there's that. And the other thing we're doing that's a bit innovative is full stack product, which is an equivalent of full stack engineering, and it stretches across customer care, product management, and product design. And much like how our engineers enjoy a lot of autonomy in the sense that like they don't like a front-end engineer doesn't need to wait for a back-end engineer who doesn't need to wait for a DevOps engineer to build something. It's the same for us in product. Like we have absolute proximity to our customers. We have a very strict system to design in, and we know how to make, we're the right people to make the decisions on scope. So therefore, like we don't have these 3 or 9 people to work through. It's just us. Now, again, like Kevin said earlier, if you're a startup, you might already be in this spot. Our advice to you is to not move away from this spot, is to cultivate this becoming your forever place. And so we have 4 full stack product people, including me, and our perception is that's our final team. And like we can create significant pieces of work without a lot of overhead and effort, because we've removed all the noise around the edges by making things like customer care extremely efficient and codified and well run. And so, you know, that efficiency thing becomes really important again, but also it's really satisfying. Like Chris, one of the full stack engineers, says he loves it because he can just do so much so easily that he feels really like empowered, because he doesn't have to like play this pass the parcel game. So yeah. Did you want to just explain a little bit, Kev, about how the teams are organized, bearing in mind we have 5 minutes to go?
Sure, real quick. Obviously, you know, we've got unified engineering. We're still trying to run it like a startup. We're trying to scale that portion, but you can't have one team of 15 people. You know, 15 engineers all working on the same thing is not going to go anywhere fast. So we split that up. We go, actually, what works well for us? Well, you know, 3 to 4 people working on something. That's actually, you know, that is that small startup space. That's where we saw, you know, you kind of get the most bang for your buck, and you feel most comfortable as an individual in that team because you have a large contribution to the team. So yeah, we kind of split our larger team splits into smaller crews. They work on full pieces of feature work. So in that roadmap item, they take one and they work from kind of inception to delivery, doing all the things that need to be done along the way, and working with product to do that. So we kind of have, I guess, lanes of work going at any given time. But still, there's a lot of collaboration between those crews to make sure that we're sharing the knowledge. We're not kind of siloing. And the big one there also is, for us, crews don't live forever. So a crew lives at most 6 months, and we swap things around because we want to make sure that people continue to be able to work across the full code base. And for that, you can't silo your knowledge. You need to make sure that across your whole team, you actually have that ability to move across the app, especially as it gets more complicated. So yeah, we swap people around. We make sure that those crews are more living, and they really just live for a shorter space of time, but enough so that they can form. Because you can go, oh well, they'll just live for 2 weeks until this feature is done. Then you never have a crew that's formed together and hasn't really been able to work well together. There's a lot more in the book. Let's move on.
Sorry, I have randomly someone's doing building work that I can do very loudly. I'm not sure if you guys can, but in product, I said we have full stack product and four in our final team, but we also work in pairs, and our pairs are also semi-permanent. So no product person works alone. And why pairing works really well is it helps us to upskill people who aren't full stack product yet into full stack product. And then our two more senior people, myself and Chris, will rotate the other full stack product people around, because obviously we have naturally different skill sets to share with them as well, and ways of thinking. And then Joyfully is an actual methodology. So it's a very structured process that has all these elements and stages in it. This is the way that it would run for a UX and technically rich chunk of work. But some pieces of work are more technical, and so for those we wouldn't actually force it through this entire process. We can flex this however we want. And inside of the book, if you download it, every single one of these is described. We had a big project that we delivered late last year, and we actually used that project and we talk through it, and we literally have screenshots of everything. And in particular, what's cool about this for you as a founder, you're really involved in agreeing the objectives. And when the team gets to this stage here, asynchronous feedback, our founders are involved and are inside of Figma along with the rest of the team, kind of commenting on questions and clarifications they have of very visual stuff. And then we do a mammoth meeting, which is company-wide. And again, our founders attend at that point and give feedback on what's being built ahead of it being built. And it's then that we go ahead and actually start kicking off and building. And often we invite our founders to be part of the group, or at any time they can go to QA and they can look at features and be part of commenting then as well. So be really good to give your teams the space to do the work and give them the moments in which to bring you in, so you can still influence it in the way that you should be. It's not about removing yourself completely, because your feedback has got a lot of value if it comes in at the right moments. And so we try to make sure that we always get input from our founders. Yeah. I think we're, we have a whole minute. Well, let's show another slide.
And so a little more, just to give people some more time for Q&A. I can see we've got one there so far. Just anyone tuning in, please do, if you've got any questions, chuck them in the chat or the Q&A box, and then we can get to those once, I get an idea of how many questions there are and how much time we might need to answer those in the meantime.
Awesome. And yeah, at the end of the book, Kevin and I stepped back and we were it just helped us really clarify that there are just really these 5 key principles that underpin everything we do, not just in product and engineering. It's across our entire company. And it's this notion, you heard us talk about a product and engineering partnership. Well, we now have sales and customer is one thing as well. And so that's really common. We have 3 CEOs. We have 2 heads of engineering, 2 heads of customer, they're co's. So we have all these co-shared leadership roles. And when we hire, we really hire people who are also purpose-driven. And so who really care about helping the product make an impact more so than, I don't know if you want to take an example of a product person applying the purest methodology in the most theoretically correct way. It's more about making the impact, and that's the most important thing. Very ego-free is how I would put it. I think we did a great job of explaining the broad capabilities part. And And the sustainable innovation for us is we don't, you saw that Gantt chart, like there's no sprints, man. There's no sprints. There's like, I guess when I was earlier on in my product career, and I'm sure founders will feel this inclination as well to like push people for deadlines, and sometimes they're artificial, and sometimes those deadlines are soft with third parties that you could shift them. It's like, let's avoid that game. Let's just build quality work and manage expectations on behalf of product engineering if that's what's needed, because the quality code is really the most important thing. And it feels super counterintuitive when you're early stage to behave that way, but I feel like it's really the smartest way to go, having done this a few times. And yeah,
there's also there's a big one in there that we haven't really covered, which is a lot of engineering teams, there's this idea where you, especially in Scrum, when sprints, you kind of do product work and then you have time off to do other work. And we've completely axed that idea, because it really gives this concept that one is considerably more important than the other. And that, you know, maybe you get the opportunity, whereas when you really consider it, and it's just part of our roadmap, we do it alongside the product work. We often do it as part of the product work, because it's really like, you know, there are issues, they will have an impact. As long as we can describe what those impacts are, then we go, obviously we need to do that for the business. So it's like we don't make these two classes of work, you know, the product work that's done in sprints, and then you have time off in order to do the things that you think are important, but the rest of the business doesn't care about. It's like we actually realize, no, we are a software company, this does matter, and we can compare that to everything else that we're building, and what kind of impacts are these kinds of work going to have.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, this is the last thing we had to share, but actually the whole company is now structured this way. So like, it's joyfully started out as a product and engineering thing. It was product and engineering that had the positive, negative roadmaps. But our whole company has positive, negative roadmaps. Even our operations team, like our marketing team, everyone has a positive, negative roadmap that they go to the founders with, you know, that everybody agrees, a founders, a CEO collective rather, with, and we all agree, yes, that these are the most important things, and they have a process for brokering what those are, and it's just really clear and transparent. And so it just gives us as CEOs like this real certainty that each part of our business is actually doing the things that we understand will make the biggest impact in their relevant parts of the business, and collaborating with each other accordingly. So they actually we're planning these roadmaps in concert, so that, for example, if operations has something really important on the security end or the risk end, that they don't put something on their roadmap without considering that engineering might need to do a piece of work there. So there's some sort of cross collaboration and, like, I guess, consistency and a shared pattern of doing things. Also, you can see here we have 3 full stack roles. So we told you about full stack engineering and full stack product, but we've just invented full stack customer, which is the combination of sales and customer care. And so product full stack and customer full stack do overlap on customer care, but we've invented another full stack role. And that kind of means that like 90% of our business is at the moment made up of 3 roles that can do the majority of the work. And then we have supporting roles around that. And so all these people have an extreme amount of like mana, basically, as well as autonomy. So when you're a customer person, you have real customer knowledge even when you're dealing with prospects yourself firsthand, which is super powerful, and a huge amount of support because they also work in crews. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers off what we were planning on chatting about up front today.
Cool, awesome, really great presentation. So many just cool like gems of information and insight into where, you know, you can kind of shape your company to be a lot more productive. And I really admire you mentioned your goal was to be a $1 billion company with under 100 staff, right?
Yeah, with 100 people.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Do you think that is doable, and is it on track? And
I think we feel that it's on track for now. The biggest unknown for us is now the customer space, and whether we can, this idea that we've created of customer crews and this full stack customer role, and whether that idea can scale efficiently. But it's had a huge influence on product roadmap, because I guess a lot of the things that you might expect traditional customer care or customer support to do, or even customers to do in our enterprise kind of world, we're actually building it into the product so that we don't have to hire a bunch more typical traditional customer success style people. So it's going to continue to be dependent on our ability to, I guess, make things more efficient at the end of the day. But we're on track, I would say, so far. We actually have a few interesting metrics. So, you know, every SaaS company is targeting a certain number of ARR per year, and of course we have that. But our top level KPI is how many people are we helping, because our mission is to make life better for people at work. So we have that number. Then we have ARR, and then the other number, which is an assurance towards this capital efficiency aim, is actually ARR per employee. And so when you start tracking that number and seeing what that number is, it's a really good indicator if you're heading in the, like, because you can literally do the multiplier to see if you're on track. And so like we'd hope to get it to a point and then it level off if we're doing the efficiency thing right. And of course, we're building partnerships and advisory boards rather than having to scale a large sales organization. The last thing you want to do is become sales-led in today's world. Also, that model doesn't work anymore. So it's not the best investment.
Mm-hmm. And would you say, even as you do kind of scale up to that size, can you picture any issues with perhaps staff being too stressed or pressured, or is that part of the system is just checking in constantly to make sure that they are comfortable with the rate at which they're going?
Yeah, I think we're trying a lot of things, but we also change when we see things are not working. We actually just in CEO Collective busy building a framework to be really deliberate about how we grow the business. And one of the things we were talking about last night was you want to grow deliberately, but you also want to shrink deliberately. Basically, you want to be really deliberate. So like if something's not working, definitely go in another direction. And I wouldn't say pivot, but like course correct and adjust all the time. But I would say we would rather have a bigger team than a stressed team.
Yeah.
And also potentially, it's very radical, but possibly less ARR and be happier.
Yeah.
And, you know, be $1 billion business that everyone's like stressed and hates their jobs and it affects their whole lives. Hopefully that's not what we need to do. But only time will really tell.
Yeah, exactly. Always happiness comes first. So it's always a good goal to have. Just a Q&A that I saw come through from Jim Robinson. I faced the conflict that you mentioned, Ruby. I headed product for a startup, though I'm an engineer. Please speak more about that conflict resolution, if that's something.
You mean the conflict? Is Jim able to speak?
Jim, are you still in here? Just checking as you're gone. I can see if
there's I guess there's, yes, he says he's here. There's two types of conflict. There's the conflict of like different people thinking that we need different priorities, and then there's a conflict between product and engineering. Is that the one you're talking about, Jim? Product and engineering conflict?
I think. There we go.
Here we go.
Yeah, cool.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm originally from America. I've been Kiwi for like 15 years, but a startup I was involved with, I was VP of product, but it was constant. I mean, it was fights. I mean, let's make no mistake, like cats and dogs between product and engineer. And I came from an engineering background, and on it, I mean, I don't know. You could articulate the conflict, and you said the mammoth meeting and stuff like that, which to me means a big fight in a nice way. but yeah, I have a lot of experience, and I've done good stuff, but this has always been a struggle for me. It continues to be. It's kind of like this fight. And Kevin made a comment. It's like, oh, we want to do work. Other work in quotation marks, I comment, and that's usually like for the engineering people, it's like, it's like if we don't do this infrastructure work, then the house of cards will just fall down, or with the best intentions, but that's at odds with the product people, and it gets weird. I just really appreciate your comment on that, and just speak extemporaneously about that. It's because I find this tension and conflict really crucial to success. Yeah. So yeah, I'll just go back on mute.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you describe is the reality for probably like the majority of product and engineering teams. I'm not sure if the majority of teams end up like actually fighting, but I certainly felt that way myself, and like every company until now, until Joyous. So I empathize.
Creative debates.
Okay.
Right. No, but you know what I mean. Yeah, but it's a
Yeah.
conflict.
Well, I mean, what was interesting is Phil, one of our founders, who I've noticed seems to be on this call, he told me when I joined that, and Lisa, who at the time was the only head of engineering, that the most important thing we needed to do for the first 3 months was become really close and become partners. And so we actually put a deliberate investment into our relationship aside from the work. So we would spend a deliberate amount of time together, come to know each other and develop empathy for each other in our situations. We became each other's support person. There was nothing happening to me that Lisa didn't know about, and vice versa. And so it was like a real friendship, a real like strong bond that formed between us. And then, that naturally extended out. Kevin was part of that really early as well. And so when you focus on the relationship first, a lot of interesting things start happening. You stop seeing each other as some other thing on the other side of me, and you start seeing each other as two people or two groups facing a common challenge. So that did a lot for us. But even inside of Mammoth meetings, we actually have a democratic process that's described in the book. It's a 6-step process, and even a founder falls in line with it. And we basically have a Mammoth meeting. Everyone comes together, they look at a piece of work, everyone has asynchronously given feedback ahead of that. So all that should remain at a Mammoth meeting is the things you could resolve asynchronously. And then the start of the meeting, someone just asks everyone in 1 or 2 words, what's your thing that you still want us to discuss? We write it down. That's all we do. We don't discuss it. Then we go to the first one and we do this thing where we listen to the person who raised the item. We debate 2 options. We go to an early vote. We listen to the minority, we listen to the majority, we re-vote, highest vote wins, next item. The first time we did that, myself and the founder, Mike, who's not here, got locked in an argument for 20 minutes. From that point onwards, everything else took 2 minutes, and it's never taken longer than that again. So we were able to move through like 15 plus items per meeting, and we just fly through agreements because we just got the feel of this process. That really helped us at an atomic level.
Super cool. That's really helpful because otherwise you're just wasting your
time.
20 minutes of just blah blah blah.
And what I found, Jim, by the way, annoyingly, that time I was disagreeing with Mike, he was correct. And the thing that made it hard to see was that he had a different idea to me. But just listening to an idea versus actually seeing the idea is quite different. And so I think a product person has a duty of care when other people give you ideas. If you can't understand or enough appreciate what they're saying, it doesn't take shit tons of time to build a prototype or to try it. And that will either prove their point or prove your point that it's not viable. So like our company is heavily oriented towards data-driven decision-making and making decisions based on logic and not feelings and emotions, or not being tied to your own idea, but rather being tied to the best idea. And so it becomes so much less about people competing and more about like competing for outcomes. And if you can get to that place, it's a special place to be. And it's also challenging to stay there, but as long as you can get back there, that's good.
Cool. Awesome. If there's any other questions.
Thank you for that, Ruby. That was awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Glad you like it.
I'll just take you away from there, Jim. Sorry. There we go. I just saw a comment came through from Gary saying he loved your approach to efficient and effective startup communication, and the interesting points were classic search for conscientious meaning between tech and product in the Mammoth meeting and signaling the end of post-sales VP appointment. Awesome. Thanks for your feedback, Gary. Awesome. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes. So any last words anyone wants to chuck in? Otherwise, I think we've had a really great chat, heaps of cool learnings, and since this will be recorded, so if you want to go through the slides again later because I know there was some great insight in those. Those should also assumably be on the recording, which is awesome. We really thank Ruby and Kevin for being keen to share this insight. And you can also go and download the Joyfully book from their website, which I'm assuming is still the Joyous website.
Yeah, so joyoushq.com/joyfully, and you can read the book online or just download it for free.
Oh,
Thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah, Kevin just chucked it in the chat there. So do check that out, give it a download and a read and share around.
Yeah, we're also real people, so you can just like message us if you have any questions. We don't mind answering.
Cool. And would that be best on LinkedIn?
Yeah, probably the easiest way.
Cool, awesome. Quick shout out, thank you to our sponsors, BNZ, NZ Trade and Enterprise, AWS, Evander Holdings, Jasmine Investments, and K1W1 for making our weekly webinars possible and supporting our community of Kiwi founders. We're hoping to get over back to the US in the next month or two. So if anyone is planning a trip over, do give us a bell. I'm kind of hoping to create that reconnection between New Zealand and the States as everything opens up again. So that's what's on our agenda. Cool. Any last words from you guys, Kevin, Ruby, before we sign off?
Thanks for having us. It's always fun to talk about this stuff. Always fun to kind of plant some of these seeds. And again, like we talked about a lot of things, a lot of them quite different than what people do. Take what works. We're not saying take the whole thing. Be inspired. Adjust it as works for your situation. And yeah, we're just keen to make more places a bit nicer to work at. Hopefully, remove some of that conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just thanks for listening to us and thanks for asking us to come. It's always so nice, such a nice feeling when people want to hear what we're doing. Thank you.
No, that's awesome. You guys have some really great insights. So we really appreciate having you on the webinar today. Awesome. Well, we'll sign off here. Hope everyone has a great day and do check out the Joyous HQ website if you're keen to download Joyfully book. Cool. Catch you guys on the next one next week.
Thank you.
Cool. See ya.
Bye.